Guys, welcome back to Decoding Babylon. This ended up being a part 2 that we didn't really intend to be 2 parts, but we had to talk about MKUltra. And in order to talk about MKUltra, we had to talk about Operation Paperclip.
Paperclip.
So now we're going to actually get into like what those Germans who came here, what they did, and obviously the work that was carried on through first the OSS and then the CIA.
And if you want to watch the first part of this one should probably be fine going on YouTube and everything else. But the other video, we say a lot of the other N word that you're not supposed to say of the Germans. And so that video will be probably on like Rumble or whatever other platforms.
It'll be a Rumble exclusive because if you guys want to hear the things that are true with less filter, we're gonna put more stuff on Rumble as well.
Yep. And so, but this one, we're going to be just talking about MKUltra, and we're going to talk about mind control and kind of give you guys a basis so that way you understand what it kind of basically comes from. And like, this is how it permeates into our culture today. And so that way you understand what's happening, because we mention all the time about Project Monarch and people that, the celebrities, these are people that have gone through this program. Okay. These Project Monarch and these MKUltra stuff, these things have actually, they're still going on. People think because the classified documents have been released that they're like, oh, we stopped doing it. Oh, look, here it is. We released it. Yeah, we don't do it anymore. No, that's not at all what is happening. It is continued to this day. It continues forward to this day. And everybody needs to be made aware of it. Like for instance, it just adapted. It adapted to newer methods. In fact, the documents they released, you can actually see that they were obviously changing methods constantly, or they were doing different things here, different things there, and they were adapting it. They continued adapting it today. And in fact, hypnosis is very real. And a big part of the reason why you don't see hypnotists everywhere, but you can see them at certain places, at certain shows, you'll see them just because the really good hypnotists, they get hired by the CIA. They get hired by the government. There isn't people that are going around with this ability of hypnosis. They work for the government because that's what they're doing to people. They're utilizing the technology and the understanding of hypnosis, mind control. This is all real stuff. And there's just so much to it. Let's jump into it.
I think the interesting part about it is that people hear MKUltra, and probably a lot of people, and that's why we figured we need to talk about it, is a lot of people probably don't really know what it is. And it's like, oh, that's that conspiracy theory. It's like, well, guess what? It's a conspiracy, but it's, again, it's put this in the conspiracy fact folder, because Freedom of Information Acts have come out, and these things are you can look this stuff up. This stuff is facts. The stuff that they were trying
things too.
The stuff they're trying to do, and obviously this is the stuff we know about. So what it really comes down to is MKUltra. Like I said, like Brian mentioned, it's taken different forms. I think one was Project Monarch, and there was obviously MKUltra, and then there was even something called Midnight Climax, and we'll probably get into a little bit more of that.
Yep.
But what it really has a lot to do with is, again, mind control. Mm-hmm. So the Germans from the 30s who were experimenting on people, that stuff, those scientists came here to the United States, and of course they use it under the guise of, oh, the communists are trying to do these things to our POWs over and think. So we need to figure out these same techniques they're doing. Mm-hmm. Whatever. I mean, were they doing that stuff over there? Probably. I mean, I don't doubt that the Soviets were doing the same things if they were getting the same scientists. But obviously they're doing under the guise of, well, we have to do these things. Well, again, if you're the good guys, shouldn't you have some certain ethical standards that you're not willing to stoop to? Did we beat those Germans in order to be like them? Well, the answer is
maybe we didn't beat them.
I mean, when we say we mean the United States, and the answer is yes. Obviously, if you can't beat them, join them or bring them here. And so that's what they've done. And so you find out what they were doing, and what they were basically trying to do was they were going to basically wipe people's memories out. They're planting false memories. They were doing every kind of imaginable experiment you could to control people.
It was the same things that the Germans way back in the day were doing. The same exact things when they came over here. They were continuing some of these experiments supposedly, and more intensely actually in different ways, and practicing it originally on the deplorables, they said, of society. So that would be like people that are on the streets, or prostitutes, or, and that was what you were mentioning about Project or Climax, Midnight Climax, was it?
Yeah,
Where they were
Climax.
actually, yeah, they were actually experimenting and doing like mind control and manipulation to see what they could do by utilizing sex workers and sex to see what type of leverage they could get over certain individuals by developing like literal like blackmail lists. Okay, and they were using blackmail, and they were using drugging people. They were drugging people like they would give the prostitutes were CIA operatives that would like drug the Johns, they call them, right? And then they would bring these people in, and they would like drug them and do experiments with these people unwillingly. And so they did it originally only on the deplorables, they said.
Yeah.
Like only on the people that they thought were not bad.
They started with POWs. Is like this is what the program says. They started with POWs. So obviously, think about Abu Ghraib and all these. Like, they're taking these people over through war, and then they're just
like at Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, just putting
probably doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what are they doing in these places where these people are not getting trials? So they're just putting them through this program. They were also doing it to prisoners, like people in mental asylums. They were doing it to our own troops. Obviously where they were volunteering, like, of course I'm sure they claimed they were volunteering. And then eventually they worked their way up into like regular society where they were using prostitutes, tricks and Johns. And they were like, and they were like either drugging the prostitute or drugging the person who was in. And of course, it's like, when you think about it, it's like, obviously what they were doing was, if I did this wicked thing to you, Brian, if you did something illegal at the time, what are you going to do? I work for the CIA. What are you going to do? You're going to tell on me? You were with a prostitute. And it's like, so then eventually like these programs kind of go dark again. Cause like, obviously we're talking about the dark agency, the CIA. And it's like, oh, well, I guess they stopped at tricks and Johns. Obviously, obviously that's where we get into my conspiracy theorists to say, hey, they probably never stopped. They probably have always been doing it. And whatever techniques they learned from all the tests they did, they've probably used them in all facets of our society.
Well, they even see, the thing is, they even went into, first there was like studies where they were doing like television manipulation. They actually used televisions and brainwashing methods by showing them stuff, and then they did things where they like repeat phrases over and over, and it was almost like torture to try to get the person's mind. And then they got into drugs, and when they got into the drug realm, they actually created the drug like agenda in the world. And in fact, I think it's Timothy Leary who's like the father of LSD,
like the Pied Piper of like the 60s, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like the dude that like pushed the LSD agenda. He himself says he single-handedly credits the CIA for the development and the progress, the successful progress of LSD to the world. Okay, so like literally, he says the CIA, they made it, they pushed it. It was totally an agenda that they took. I mean, when you have endless money at your fingertips and access, you can create whatever agenda you want. But like, they went into the jungles and they were looking for magic mushrooms because they heard these mushrooms altered people's states of mind, and they were trying to alter your frame of mind so that way they could learn to control you in your subconscious states of mind. They were studying hypnosis. They even had like this creepy ventriloquist guy that worked for them who was also like child bad stuff, right? And like a bunch of terrible things. And like this is all part of these people that they found, these really wicked people, to help them work on these projects of like controlling people's minds.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, especially when it's like, when we obviously, I think there's so many things that we just hear, and it's like until you actually have ears to hear and eyes to see it, it just doesn't really resonate with you. But when you start talking about magic mushrooms, I think everyone's like, oh, it's magic because it gets you high. Well, no, they're magic because like literally it is magic. It came from some jungle in Mexico where they were literally working with shaman. medicine men, medicine women.
Our government was doing this.
These are like religious ceremonies, and they took the compounds out of this magic mushrooms, and they made like psilocybin, they made LSD. And so LSD, it just turned out, when obviously we were doing all these experiments on people, it made people more suggestive. So so that was part of, so not only were they using hypnosis, but they were using drugs. And again, so what I found fascinating is I was doing a little research, and I was listening to Rogan at one point, and he was talking about this guy named Louis J. West. He had an author on, and he was talking about this. He read a book about the Manson family, and so I started to make these I started making these connections where it was like these hippies from the '60s, who are obviously, before Charles Manson, nobody really thought of the hippies being like anything but like peace and love and everything like that.
Manson was a CIA operative.
Well, it turns out that he had these connections with this Louis J. West in this clinic, and they called it the Haight Ashbury. The Haight, isn't it called interesting? And they were giving all these. They were doing experiments on these hippies with LSD and also speed. And so they were doing these experiments, and it turns out that these people were like, Charles Manson had like a criminal record like a mile long, but he kept on getting out of jail. And it's like, well, how did he keep getting out? Where it's because, it was likely that he was working with the CIA, and they were, I mean, just think about it. What they were trying to do was create Manchurian candidates. So if they could take somebody who was all about peace and love, and like, if you could take somebody who was like a trippy dippy hippie who didn't want who wanted to stick flowers in the butt of gun, in like the barrel of a gun, you could turn those people into cold-blooded killers. It's like, that is what they were trying to do. And guess what? That is the story of the Manson family. But what I thought was really interesting was the story of this Louis J. West guy, who is basically, he worked with the CIA. He was a psychologist. And it turns out, just like in the movie Batman Begins, I was making these connections where he had all these connections with, like, he was working at a mental asylum, and then he was experimenting on the people there, like the stockade and that. And he was trying to induce certain mental disorders. And it was this guy, Louis J. West's idea was, how you can get away with doing this, start experimenting on people who already got mental disorders. Like, how would anyone know the difference?
Terrible.
And like, that's literally like this, the story of Scarecrow in Batman is that he's this Batman villain who's a psychologist, and he's using these drugs in order to like basically project all this fear on people. So he's spraying them.
And he wasn't just drugging them. He was doing terrible things like starving them for like weeks. He was force starving people, and then leaving them in isolation. And people were like so freaked out by the door. There's actually a woman that you can watch an interview where she talks about specifically with the cases that she was talking about. And they're like, now that it came out that he was actually experimenting on him, she was not a mentally unstable person, but she got pulled into that project, and she talked about the horrors that they did to them, and like was starving them. It was straight up torture, and then drugging them secretly, and then like doing stuff to them, and how messed up their minds. Man, it's crazy.
The thing that was really probably that blew me away the most was the fact that, so in the movie Batman Begins, eventually, like, so Scarecrow is like, they're trying to basically, this is the creepy part when you think about real life and like the drugs and the influence on people, is they're putting this crap in the water, in the city, in order to basically make the whole town be afraid, and like the place would tear itself apart. So it's kind of almost like, there's literally documents of what the CIA was trying to find out ways to make the stuff in aerosol form, put it in water. I mean,
they did it. They did it with people, and I don't know how many people know about this, but the Grateful Dead, the band, the Grateful Dead, they were CIA operatives too. They even admit to it, like two of the members of the Grateful Dead. And when you would go to a Grateful Dead concert, they were putting drugs in their misters and shooting the audience. So people unknowingly were getting shot with like LSD droplets and drugs. They were getting experimented on, these unwitting crowds, to try to see the effects of LSD on mass crowds, if the band could persuade the crowd in any mass hypnotic ways. So Grateful Dead was a CIA operative band.
They were a band
created.
And they were a bit, well, they were a
to
band
manipulate.
before they were called the Grateful Dead. I think they were called the Warlocks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, even, wow,
Yeah.
even more ridiculous.
Yeah. So what was interesting is, again, so think about, so the CIA is trying to use mind control to make Manchurian candidates. Well, so then you have the Kennedy assassination, right? So of course,
Yep.
if you're listening to us, you probably know. It was not the patsy. It was not just the one
Yes.
guy. It wasn't just the one. It wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone. I mean, that's crazy. Because obviously, and
Yeah.
how do we know that? Is because Jack Ruby just killed this guy in a crowded basement with police and reporters all around. Well, the interesting part about, like, obviously, the main question would be like, so why did Jack Ruby just kill this guy? Obviously, now he's going to jail forever, maybe getting the death penalty himself. Like, why would he do that? Well, the answer is we don't know, because nobody really ever found out why, because Jack Ruby died real soon after he was in jail. And one of the reasons we don't know is because Louis J. West, who was working with Charles Manson over in San Francisco, just so happened to have in a 48-hour period, was working with Jack Ruby, who'd never had any kind of, like, basically major psychology, yeah, he was doing some psych evaluation. Well, within 48 hours, before he talked to the Warren Commission, which is the commission that was supposed to investigate the Kennedy assassination,
Wow.
he goes in to see Jack Ruby, and Louis J. West declares that Jack Ruby has suffered a psychotic break that he'll never recover from. He declared him insane. And, like, literally, he was like hiding under the table, just like experiencing massive hallucinations. So in the movie of Batman Begins, like, there's literally a scene where they have a mob boss sends a person in to kill somebody in a crowded courtroom, assassinate somebody. And so this mob boss basically gets called into a room where eventually he gets arrested. And then he's in there with Scarecrow, who's like, yeah, like, they're talking back and forth. And of course, there's nobody's recording them. So he's like, the mob boss is basically saying, I'm going to tell everyone what you did. And so Jack Ruby had mob connections. So this mob boss and Batman is basically saying, yeah, how are you going to keep my mouth shut? And the guy's like, well, we'll just kill you. And he's like, you can't get, he's like, even Ra's al Ghul can't get me in here. And he's like, of course, he just takes a deep breath. And then he sprays
him with drugs.
And he sprays this stuff in his face. And it's like, the guy, and of course, Cillian Murphy is such a good actor. He walks out of there because I think Falcone was basically
totally insane.
Was saying he was crazy before that, and of course, everybody thinks he's faking. So Scarecrow walks out and says, "Well, he's not faking." Of course,
yeah, he's not faking.
And he's like, Scarecrow, as he's leaving, and it's like that. That is literally the story of what happened.
That really happened.
I mean, it's like, and so, like I said, when you realize that the truth is stranger than the fiction, I mean, like, this is the stuff that when we say first of all, Jack Ruby, after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald, a lot of people were saying that when he was getting, like, tackled by the police and everything, they were saying, hey, what are you doing? I'm Jack Ruby. It was like, he didn't know where he was.
Yeah. So interesting thing that people need to watch is this guy named Darren Brown. Okay. He's a very famous hypnotist. Okay. He hypnotizes a guy to shoot a famous actor on stage. Okay. And the guy's never shot a gun before. And he hypnotizes the guy, and he's like, he tries to shoot the gun for the first time. He can't even hit the target. He hypnotizes him, and the dude straight up hits bullseyes. Okay. After he hypnotizes him. And you're like, okay, that's weird, right? Like, this is real. This is very real. Okay. And he does this, and the dude, he programs him that when he sees a woman in a polka dot dress, he's going to pull out a gun and shoot the guy on stage. And he does it. And he has a fake blood pouch and everything. So the guy really thinks he did it, and he takes, like, I'm sure he had to have, like, counseling afterwards to, like, recover from what he'd just done, but the whole experience is like, when you watch this stuff, dude, like Darren Brown literally reveals the situations, and he tells you, like, the people like Sirhan and these people that shot and killed, like, JFK and all this stuff, like, these people that had done this, they all show signs of hypnotic induction. They actually all show signs of hypnotic states, altered states of mind. They don't remember the experience. They're they're dazed afterwards. There's a lot of confusion. They're very like they're in denial of their situation. They're like,
Hmm.
well, I guess I did it. Like they show all the signs of somebody that was under a hypnotic induction, which means this is Project Monarch continued. Okay,
Yeah,
this
no,
is literally Project Monarch continued,
I
and
mean, so if you really
yeah.
think about this, so like, I mean, like, and this is how a lot of people have really started to
Mm-hmm.
question the CIA was probably right around. Like, obviously, you have all the fiasco of what was
Mm-hmm.
going on. We even mentioned Project Bluebeam in Cuba. JFK was like the maddest person ever about like all the mess that was happening in Cuba, and so like
Mm-hmm.
he was doing these battles with the CIA. So obviously, like I said, this is pretty much. I don't think that most people dispute this at this point. It's like the CIA was involved in his assassination.
Well, didn't they
Yeah.
just release the papers that
Well,
said that confirmed
they
some
did
stuff?
they did, but they kind of redacted everything. I mean, they kind of like
Oh.
they kind of say, but they kind of don't
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, really, when it came down to it, it's like no one guy is just taking out the president like that. I mean, it's obviously
Yeah.
somebody's behind it. But I mean, so when you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
like it's possible that I mean, first of all, I don't even think Oswald is the guy who even I don't think his gun killed Kennedy. But secondly,
No.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
so they took out, so Jack Ruby was likely involved in some kind of mind control where he was the Manchurian candidate, goes and kills Oswald because he didn't know where he was after he was super confused. And then literally he's gassed by something. Obviously, there was another psychiatrist who interviewed Ruby afterwards and says he didn't understand how he could have snapped like that unless he mentions that it's possible that he was drugged at some point. He obviously was. And
Yeah.
then obviously his testimony was worthless afterwards. He dies later of cancer, which is likely, I mean, did he really die of cancer? Like, how will we know that?
Yeah.
And so like really when you think about it, and I think this is like the overarching thing of like how scary this really is that if you were in the government at the time, and obviously, so Lyndon Johnson, all these guys, he gets promoted to president, and eventually a CIA guy, George Herbert Walker Bush, eventually becomes president. And which is interesting that when he was vice president, Ronald Reagan is almost assassinated by another guy who claims he did it for Jodie Foster. Okay, that's weird. So just think about the when you wonder like the atmosphere of fear in our government of like why does nothing ever get done in Washington? Why are these people all like why did they get there and like lie? Really think about it. John F. Kennedy was probably the most like popular president in probably a lot of people's lifetime. The CIA just killed him like on a sunny
Straight
day,
up.
in
In the middle
Texas,
of public.
in the middle of the street. And so like, and then they get away with it. And then it's like, so if the people in the government in Washington, obviously they know, like they would willing to do that kind of stuff. And then even think like Ronald Reagan, almost gets killed himself. And then who would have been president? The guy who was the director of the CIA, George Herbert Walker Bush. I mean, like that is like and now you know why this place is. I mean, talk about like, and I wouldn't even say it's a bloodless coup. That was like a straight up coup. They killed a president. They tried to kill another one, and it didn't even Ford get shot as well?
I don't know specifically,
I mean,
but
there's a lot of presidents getting shot.
there's a lot. There's a lot of people getting shot. There was like,
Yeah.
dude, they killed a lot of people, and like even what's her name, Marilyn Monroe, who was also probably killed.
Yeah.
And when they found her body, which is something they don't tell everybody, but if you look up the death record and you look up the information about it, apparently when they found her body, there was signs that she had like 14 counts of other men's germs in her or on her
Oh
or
gosh.
something like that. Like, and it was like they had basically killed like Marilyn Monroe because she knew information that she wasn't supposed to know about. And then there's also like when it comes to Project Monarch, this is a branch of MKUltra, and this is something you guys should probably look into. There's a woman, her name's Kathy O'Brien. Okay, Kathy O'Brien. Look up her video. All I can tell you is watch Kathy O'Brien's video. In fact, if you get anything from this video right now, this is what you should absolutely watch. Kathy O'Brien. Look up her video. She
Also,
has documentary.
also our Rumble video.
Also, I remember video. But look up Kathy O'Brien and watch the video on what she talks about, because that's Project Monarch, and that's when you see butterflies on everything, and you'll see these little butterfly symbols on all kinds of stuff. But it has to do with like child trafficking, sex trafficking, abuse, and dude, like when you hear her story, it is like very, very disturbing. It is very disturbing. And honestly, she talks about presidents that are involved in it. And it's like nothing you've ever heard before. And when you hear it, your jaw drops. But it's really what's going on in all of this. And there's another woman, surviving elite human trafficking. Her name is Annika Lucas. That's it. Annika Lucas. Look up Annika Lucas's story. Look up Kathy O'Brien. Watch their videos. Okay, Annika Lucas anthology or something like that. When you watch the videos, you're gonna be like, your jaw's gonna drop. And then you can also watch another video that's also part of it, which Timothy Leary. What did Timothy Leary say about that? You can go ahead and.
Oh well, see, Timothy Leary
is into Satanism.
Well, Timothy Leary, like as Brian said earlier, that he credited the CIA for basically introducing like the LSD culture in the 60s. And so then later he goes on to say, when he was being very candid, that if you're aware of who he was connected with, he talked about Aleister Crowley. And he was saying like that if he was almost like he was saying it in this kind of like, oh gosh, it's just like such a cringe way about saying, if only Aleister Crowley was around to see the work that we've carried on in his name. And it was like, so he went, so obviously you can draw like a, 2 degrees of separation where it's like, he's crediting the CIA for introducing this drug culture. And then he's saying that through this, they've carried on Aleister Crowley's work, which is like, Aleister Crowley is the father of modern Satanism, like basically the father of the modern New Age. And it's like, that is, again, where the science and the non-science kind of meet of, this is occult stuff. They are tampering with people's mind. They're trying to split people's. When you start hearing about alter egos, I really believe that what they're really doing is they're trying to break people apart through trauma. And I think they're trying to allow, like through super amounts of fear, demon possession. And that's why.
That's straight up what they're doing.
Yeah. So it's
like when a person goes through large amounts of trauma, this is stuff I deal with all the time. But like I see it when people go through large amounts of trauma, the brain divides. It's a survival mechanism. Okay, your brain separates, the cells divide, and there's sections of your brain that your brain just like goes bloop and breaks off that section and goes, this is where we're storing that terrible traumatic experience of being by a family member or your parent or something terrible, and it stores that horrible experience in that broken part of your brain. Okay, and then it divides your mind, and then you've got two like sections of mind essentially. Okay, and that's this other one where it's got the trauma into it. It's more susceptible to demonic possession, and this is where demons go into, and they reside into these we call them alters. You become alter personalities, and this is how people that become bipolar. It's like you're not bipolar, you become bipolar because certain parts of your brain break away, and then they become more susceptible to oppression, possession, demonic influence, and whatever, because you've like lost some of the other components of your cognitive functioning that's connected in this broken part of your brain. And so you don't think about things the same. And so you become like this violent, angry, mean, hurting person because of the trauma that's happened to you. And that's straight up where demons go. Demons, they look for it. And so these things that Aleister Crowley was doing by raping children and doing these terrible acts to these kids, they were literally doing this stuff to divide your mind, to create chasms and holes where they could interject demons into and create Manchurian candidates. Really, they're creating demons that are inhabiting these blank spaces of your mind that take over your body and control you. Like that's literally what's going on. And I know it sounds insane, but that's what our government was involved in doing. They just don't admit to the demonic part of it, but they were pretty much, there's parts of it where they were straight up doing it. And when you hear the stories from like Annika Lucas and you hear Kathy O'Brien's stories, you're like, whoa, that's like insane what they were doing. And you recognize that's what's really going on.
Well, it's interesting. And I think so to kind of to go forward to where we are right now. And it's like, so that's why when Brian and I were discussing in the Taylor Swift video, you're seeing this evidence of it when they're showing, like, they start the video off with like this magical swirl portal magic, and then you have these butterflies flying up. And then later they're showing her like in the land of Oz. Well, you often see, so you see the butterfly, and if you think about what a butterfly is, Project Monarch, it's like, so it starts off as a caterpillar, and then there's the cocoon, and then the metamorphosis, and it becomes this butterfly.
Yeah.
And so like you start to see these things, and it's like that's kind of that's the programming they're showing. Like obviously you could imagine them trying to present it in a way to a pop star. We're going to make you a beautiful butterfly. But what they're really doing is like they're using some kind of they're brainwashing them, and eventually that's why they might come out and say, "Hey, I'm Sasha." You know, Beyonce is going to say, "I'm Sasha Fierce now." They're these people are going to say like Marshall Mathers is now Slim Shady. You know, is like these people. These are not alter egos. These are not they're not the same people anymore. I mean, because they're
there's
like
two people there.
yeah, it's someone
and
else.
they're altered states, and then that altered state, that other mind, it becomes housed by demonic entities and other personalities, and people don't believe. And so like these people are, you got to understand, we feel bad for these people, guys. Like we're not looking at these people and going like, oh, they're wicked and evil, they're terrible humans. Like I genuinely feel bad for like Taylor Swift. I feel bad for Justin Bieber. I feel bad for these celebrities because they don't even realize what has happened to them. They've been put into ritual practices. They've seen terrible, evil, terrible things, like children killed in front of them, and they've been forced to participate in killing of children possibly. And then there's terrible things that they participated in or been a part of or sacrificed people. And that situation divides your mind from the trauma, and it makes you into two different people. And so you see these characters in society where they're like, all of a sudden they're doing one thing, and all of a sudden they flip and they do this other totally different thing. You're like, oh, that's so out of character. It's because they're fighting themselves. They're fighting the divided part of their mind. Okay. And like, you got to recognize these are symptoms of Project Monarch happening to these people. They're not aware that it's even happened to them. That's the crazy part. So once the trauma happens, that person's mind doesn't even know the trauma happened to them. So it's like it divides their mind, and they're totally unaware in that broken part of their mind, like that it's even there. And so like you'll see them, like they'll zone out and go into different attitudes. They'll have like little signs, and you see these little symbols of their behavior, little things. And Wizard of Oz, by the way, which is the thing that they use to psycho program people in psychosis. They use the movie of Wizard of Oz and had triggers.
Also, Alice in Wonderland is like the biggest one.
Yeah, they use these movies, they use these books, they used it to program you psychologically. So they'd watch it over and over, play it over and over to try to get like deep embedded psycho like plants in your mind. And so these are things that you'll recognize homage to these movies and to these things. And then and that's a lot of what we talk about when we're exploring things in content. We're going like, oh, that's a symbolism of Project Monarch. When we mention like Wizard of Oz, okay, clearly she's been part of Project Monarch.
Or even see like what's another one is like, so think about following the white rabbit. We always, even us as truthers, we always kind of talk about the rabbit hole. But it's like when you see, I think that's where the Playboy bunny comes from. It's like that's why they're wearing the bunny ears. And it's like you see like a lot of these celebrities dressing like Alice from Alice in Wonderland. They're doing these things from these movies. Like, of course, like I said, if you go watch Alice in Wonderland, you'd be like, this is a kid's movie. This is very like most people would probably just recognize this very strange. But obviously, this is meant to. Again, it's nothing if it's not symbolic of something. But that's what's interesting when you start to see pop stars such as even like a Kanye West, where to the normies, Kanye's just crazy. And it's like, well, Kanye has some stuff going on wrong with him, probably because we don't know what they've done to him. And that's interesting when it's like guys like Kanye, even like a lot of celebrities, all of a sudden they go to rehab, right? And it's like they just go away for a while. And it's like, just think about
reprogramming is what that really is.
Have you guys ever seen it's interesting when you think about a movie, like a goofy movie that is showing you a lot of the stuff is Zoolander. So in the movie, Ben Stiller is the stupid model. And it's funny, they admit it right in there. It's like the models were perfect for this. And actually they talk about this in like the CIA, MKUltra, where you even think about like honeypots. They're using models and like prostitutes and stuff in order to, because they're the easiest to program, probably because they get them to do stupid stuff when they're doing modeling gigs and they don't question anything. Like certain people are not really prone to this kind of stuff, probably like guys like me who'd be like, wait, why are we doing this? That didn't make any sense. Like, I don't like, people who are like ask a lot of questions, they'd be like, get rid of him. He's
exactly.
But
there's also people that have had good upbringings. You usually question things, you think about stuff. And so people that have gone through a lot of trauma, just kind of cleave on or attach to whatever thing is like trending or whatever thing the other people are saying, because they're kind of like lost. They're not exploring themselves. They're lost in the world, and so they're easy to mind control. This is why they want broken families, broken households. This is why they want this, because it makes more potential candidates for these projects, for manipulation, for taking your children. If you're all on drugs, guess what? Your children are left alone. They can abuse them. They can take
Well,
them.
it's interesting when you think about, like, so again, like you get to these pop stars who, like, most of them, just think about the ones who came through like the Disney circuit, and they start off in this really young, and it's almost like, you imagine like somebody who's a fully developed adult, it's going to be a lot harder because it's like they know what's normal, what's not normal. But like when you take somebody who's like Britney Spears or somebody like that, who really like they've lived in a fishbowl, like Michael Jackson. Like what was normal to him when he grew up in the Jackson 5 and all these things going on tour and stuff. Like people don't know what's normal. And then again, like then you think about like all the stuff that supposedly or went on at Neverland Ranch, where it's like probably stuff that happened to Michael Jackson, he ended up doing to other people who were there. And like, this is why these people seem so mentally jacked up, or they like get way on drugs, probably because they're trying to silence the demons that have been
find peace
injected in them. And but what's also fascinating is when you understand like that these demons could obviously turn somebody into a killer, could be like the Manchurian candidate, but also these demons give people power. They make them great musicians. Like obviously they can make them write hit songs. And so like you can imagine somebody who's embracing like a Beyonce, Sasha Fierce, she embraces that because it makes her powerful. It makes her fierce. It makes her all these things. And it's like, it made her like one of the biggest stars in the whole world. But then there's also people when you see like, they're so tortured and they cannot handle it, because it's like, again, that's why we have a lot of empathy for these people, because they didn't sign up for that. Like, or at least they didn't think they were. And they're trying to like, and that's why there's times where they're like, they seem like there's cries for help. They get
blackmailed into it.
Yeah, there's cries for help. And again, that's obviously how the devil works, would be like, and then how these secret societies work, where it's like that, hey, I'm going to dangle this thing. It's the Faustian bargain. You make a deal with the devil. It's like, hey, do you want these things? Sure, you can have them. But obviously you're going to compromise yourself to get them. And then it's like, then obviously you like the things still, and you don't want to get rid of, you don't want to lose them. And it's like, that's why you see these people and they just like, they don't know which way is up. And they're just like, I mean, it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking when you see, it's like, that's why like so many of them don't make it past like 27, you know, they don't make it very, they don't, and they, who is the one, you know, a lot of the ones on the Disney Channel, who was the real bad example of it, where she had a bunch of hit shows when she was young, and now she's just like
Miley Cyrus, or
Miley Cyrus. Bynes? Oh, Amanda Bynes. Yeah, Amanda Bynes is like, she is just totally just out of her mind. And like, even like a Lindsay Lohan. What happened to Lindsay Lohan? I mean, they were like the biggest stars in the world for like a minute.
Every time you see those people where they're famous and then they fall away and break away, it's usually they've had a psychotic break from the mind control Project Monarch, and they're not becoming willing participants. A lot of times they're trying to break away from it, or they're trying to hide the pain, and they're trying to get away from the system. And so then the media just paints them as loons, so that way when they start exposing stuff, nobody takes their words as credit. But like, I think Lindsay Lohan actually said stuff about it, and I think another one is Kesha. Kesha talked about about some of it, and they painted her as like a psycho. And it was just like, well, maybe you should like re-listen to what they're actually saying, because they're telling you guys the truth about something, their truth, at least from their perspective, what they're experiencing. And it's a little weird when everyone else's experience is all the same.
And like a Kanye, where it's like Kanye's either they love him, they hate him, and obviously so like, but now it's like, again, when Kanye says something true now, it's like, it's hard. He's not very credible, because he said a bunch of ridiculous things as well. And it's like, but that's how they kind of want it to be, where, again, just go back to them experimenting on these people who have done these bad things. Again, like, just think about all the people they experiment on. Well, now if you're sleeping with a prostitute, you can't come out and say, they drugged me. Because you know what, people on their couch are going to say, good. So what? You know what I mean? Because people have no empathy for those people, because it's like they have done bad things. But
That's the sad part in the world, guys. Where the whole world needs more empathy. You need more empathy for even the people that are on drugs, the people that are hurting, and that's something you absolutely need to have. And that's the reason why, because of our lack of empathy, it does make it like hard for these people to come out and say things, and like we just write them off and we go, okay, well, whatever. But the
yeah,
reality is, like, we need more empathy, and like
absolutely.
that's just that's like the biggest thing to know, because it's like that's how these people get free. That's how people expose things. That's how people deliver people and help people, and we stop some of this wickedness that's going on in the world right now. But man, I would say, lastly, look up Darren Brown, watch his videos, look up Kathy O'Brien, look up what's it, Annika Lucas, and then look up the 60 Minutes Australia Satanism episode with Teresa, and like
Mm.
watch those documentaries, and like your perspective, if this is all new to you and what we're saying sounds like crazy stuff, you watch those documentaries, and oh my gosh, you will have a very drastically different perspective of reality that's going on in the world.
Yeah, and I just wanted to
That's pretty
close with
much
like
it.
again, I want to close with saying, like Brian was saying, like just biblically, what willing of how empathetic and how willing you are to forgive and have hope for people to come back is the measure basically you're going to be judged versus. So I think that's always like important to remember. It's like, again, you think about like when Jesus tells the parable about like the king forgives a servant a debt, and then that one servant is unwilling to forgive his fellow servant of a much less debt, obviously.
He gets turned over to the tormentors.
Yeah, so it's kind of like,
Like,
so it's like that's how we have to remember. It's like that, like I feel like that you really think about it. Like we want more people to be in heaven. We don't want less. We want more, because obviously
yeah,
we want grace too, right? We want grace and
yeah.
mercy. So we obviously got to be willing to give it. And obviously the debt that we've been forgiven. And obviously I always think about it like this too, that when you think about somebody like Paul, Saul of Tarsus, and he's like killing Christians, the story of Paul is amazing. And obviously that's what he's saying. Like he was the worst, and that's what God used him so he could show like how reformed he could be. So I
Mm.
mean, I do think about it like, just think about the worst person you could think of in this on this face of the earth right now. And
Mm.
I'm not going to name any names, but imagine if that person really did have a road to Damascus moment, and they really were like, how, praise
How
God,
powerful.
how
Oh,
awesome would that would be? So like really think about it like that. Even
yeah.
like the Jeffrey Dahmers, people said, do you think he was really safe? He sounded sincere to me. I pray. I mean, I think he was. I don't have any reason to doubt he was. And so like if he can come back, that is the power of the gospel. That is, Jesus has the power to save, and everyone can be forgiven. Jesus died for
Yep.
everyone. And so like
Yeah.
that's what we would leave you with is pray for them, but also
Mm-hmm.
be aware this stuff has not gone away. And
No.
obviously, and you think in small wet measure, what they were like, obviously in close quarters, they're doing it to these people. I believe they're using those techniques on all of us all the time now. So
Yeah, I
obviously,
agree.
be vigilant, be sober, pay attention. But
Yep.
yeah,
That's it.
guys.
Absolutely.
But guys, I hope you
Sweet.
appreciate. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We're gonna obviously try to do more and more. But yeah, this is part two. And if, like I said, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, part one is over on Rumble, which it got a little too spicy for probably Google censor. So, anyways,
Yeah.
we love you guys. We guys will
Yes.
see you guys on the next one.